$1,000 check to help them put food on the table for their kids in the middle of this once-in-a-lifetime crisis. There isn't a good reason to choose to make moms and dads all across this country decide which 2 meals they'll feed their kids each day, because 3 meals is not an option. $2,000 doesn't put dinner on the table every night, but man, going to bed hungry when you're 11, it sucks. And even dealing with it every other night instead of every single night, no kid is going to turn that down. There are 52 of you. And the next 24 to 48 hours, you get to decide. Do you protect the billionaires? Or do you choose to feed that 11-year-old kid? The only thing that stands between the American people and a $2,000 emergency survival check is 52 Senate Republicans. You got it? Understand? There's a bill pending right now before the Senate that gives $2,000 to ordinary Americans. Yes, it costs a lot of money, and maybe down the line we'll have to ask the billionaires to pay for it. But the bill's here right now. The legislative session expires in 5 days. President Trump says he'll sign it. And all that matters right now is what these 52 people decide. The House passed the bill with lots of Democratic and Republican support. The president supports the idea. The only thing that can stop $2,000 payments to struggling Americans right now is 52 Senate Republicans. Some things in Washington aren't that simple, but this is. I yield the floor. With the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, guys, the Senate is in quorum call right now. You will hear silence until they come back and speak. So as you heard there, they were saying people will go hungry. People are going hungry if the 52 Republicans does not vote for this. Kids will go starving. Kids will be living out on the street because parents can't pay rent during this COVID virus. 52 Republicans that don't want it. They're saying it's too much money. Okay, we'll take your paycheck just to help the American people. That's why I say don't pay the Congress until we get the check for the American people. Don't pay Congress. But in the comments below, do you think that the Senate Republicans will get, the 52 Senate Republicans that are against this will get over it and pass it? Or do you think we need to vote the Senate Republicans that don't agree with the $2,000 out of office so we can get help to the American people? All right, guys, we're going to take a 30-second break. We'll be right back. So, all eyes are on Mitch McConnell, or as we call him, Communist McConnell. All eyes are on him. He don't want to help the American people. He wants to keep money from all this. All eyes are on Majority Leader Mitch McConnell today, after the House overwhelmingly voted to override President Donald Trump's veto on the National Defense Authorization Act and to pass the stimulus check of $2,000. It's Senate Republicans' turn to navigate whether they are willing to cross Trump in his final days in office. I wouldn't care. I would cross Trump in a heartbeat just to help the American people who voted me into the Senate. What are we going to be watching for today? Well, watch McConnell when he opens the Senate floor. The majority leader has notably not made any public comments about how he plans to handle the $2,000 stimulus check, despite the fact that Trump insisted he obtained a promise that the process would begin in the U.S. Senate. McConnell's floor remarks this morning could clarify just what direction Senate Republicans are headed. It's not good, but, the Senate Republicans. So bottom line is if McConnell, announces a plan to bring the bill up for formal vote, it still could take several days for that vote to occur, given the procedural hurdles. But as you heard right there, they said they would get it done within the next couple hours. But Majority Leader McConnell has not even tried. He has not even decided to bring it up. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will ask for unanimous consent on today to pass that measure increasing direct payments. But it's unlikely to pass, as any senator could object. Ron Johnson, who we need to get out of office here from Wisconsin, objected to more stimulus money for people because he said the Americans don't need it. The economy is bouncing back. As you see, people are commenting, hoping they do the right thing, and let's get it. Yeah, well, I hope, remember that for months, one of the biggest sticking point in the negotiations over the stimulus was how much the package would cost. Republicans don't want to spend more than $1 trillion. They don't want us to do that, but people are needing the help. But we need to get those Republicans out of office, like Roy Blunt and the Wisconsin senator and the Georgia senator that don't approve of the $2,000 COVID relief. McConnell knows adding $2,000 checks to this bill would cost hundreds of billions and more. In order for it to pass, McConnell would just need 12 Republicans to sign on. And right now, it's not clear that may exist, But Perdue tweeted, "I stood by the president 100% of the time. I'm proud to do that." Loeffler told Fox News on this morning that in response To a question about providing 2,000 payments position President Trump supports, she absolutely said we need to get relief to the Americans. 600 ain't enough. Yeah, that's true, Lindsay. He does. McConnell just don't want to help. I don't know how he got voted in and how he has not been voted out of office because he don't want to help the American people. He says he does, but he don't. I believe that we need to get somebody in there that can help. But they're too far on the election fraud right now, as we call it. Speaking of election fraud, guys, let's see here. There's something that come up about it today. Trump lashes out at Republicans after they override his veto. Video game tycoon dies on Christmas. A billionaire Chinese gaming tycoon died on Christmas Eve. He was only 39, and they're saying he was poisoned. The Yazoo Company. Huh. So, yeah, that's what we're waiting for right now. They're in quorum call. Mitch McConnell said he's still not going to bring it to the vote. But all the other Republicans are calling for it, but 52 of them need to back it. The top GOP Senator Mark Rubio backs the Trump's call for $2,000 checks. Let's see here. All right, here's one for you guys with the COVID. Business owner who defied lockdown says Democratic government sent state for her children. Salon owner accuses Oregon governor of retaliating for resisting lockdown orders. She terrorized my family. An Oregon salon owner who opened her business in defiance of the state's lockdown accuses Governor Kate Brown of retaliating against her and her family in a $100,000 lawsuit, which details the damages she sustained due to extended closures and exorbitant fines issued against her. As I tried to open my doors against the governor's mandate back in May, she said, she came at her with the full weight of the state. She terrorized myself, and she terrorized my stylist, and she terrorized my family. She took every government agency she could, and she put her full weight into intimidating me into closing, including sending child protective services to my home and threatening the removal. As we know, Child Protective Services is a corrupt agency anyway. They are so corrupt, they'll listen to anybody. Because each child that DFS has in their custody, they will get a bonus from the state. We have seen it with some parents. We're working on an interview with a father right now in Jefferson County, Missouri, who had sexual abuse charges, but the charges were dropped, found not guilty, had DFS's evidence through the review board here in Missouri, overturned the DFS's preponderance of evidence to unsubstantiated due to the fact the mother was coaching the children. He is still fighting today to see his children from DFS. DFS took his rights, and he's still fighting. And DFS is sad, you know. DFS is doing this to his father. But hopefully we'll have good outcome when he goes to court next month. So, President Trump calls out the leaders. Trump's going to, I don't know what Trump's thinking that would happen in these last 30 days. Oh, here's one for you. Who would like to see Ivanka 2024? Iowa tweet fuels presidential speculation. A tweet by Ivanka Trump is raising eyebrows in the political world, as it may hint that President Trump's daughter and advisor may have national aspirations of her own. The younger Trump took to Twitter on Monday to write that she loves Iowa, using an exclamation point for extra emphasis. Her tweet quickly garnered over 10,000 likes. Trump was retweeting, but Iowa, she loves Iowa. I believe if Trump's younger daughter gets into office, if she runs for president, I have no doubt in my mind that she would win, win the presidency. But we don't know. It depends if the Trumps are in jail after the Senate. But do you think that Ivanka Trump will win the presidential election? Comment below and we'll see what you guys all got to say. Okay. Another story from the Newswire. Children labor in palm oil industry tied to Girl Scout cookies. Really? They are two young girls from two very different worlds, linked by global industry that exploits an army of children. A Girl Scout? I don't know about that story. I'm going to have to read that before I talk any more about that. Child labor. Yeah, we got a bunch of child labor. Let's see here. Let me see here, guys. I'll be right back with you. I'm going to put you back here with the Senate. All right, guys, in local news, young Belgrade, Missouri boy is hospitalized after he was found unresponsive in Springfield, Missouri hotel's pool. A young Belgrade, Missouri boy is recovering at a Springfield hospital after a near drowning at a hotel. Police and paramedics were called to the Baymont Inn on East Evergreen Street Monday night after witnesses found the boy not breathing in the hotel's pool. The witnesses started CPR, then officers took over. When they arrived and paramedics were then able to revive the child before rushing him to Mercy Hospital here in Springfield, Missouri. Police say foul play is not suspected, but we are hearing that the child is on a respirator this morning and that the child has been having one right after the other seizures all night. They think that he had a seizure in the swimming pool. And that, who's ready for snow? Yes, I said the 4-letter cuss word. But who's ready for some snow? I know I am. I'm ready to see some snow. But I'm not ready for the I word. Ice is my new cuss word. So, rain moves in tonight, guys. Rain moves in tonight. We still have those 2 alert days later for this week, but there is an uncertainty. A few morning showers, a wintry mix, or a light snow might be falling. But all this activity is moving quickly to the northeast and will be out of here by lunchtime. Huh. That was weird. Huh. So, who's ready for snow? Let's see what we got here. So, my weather map's not pulling up, guys. So today, Missouri is supposed to get freezing rain possible in the northern parts of Missouri. Tomorrow is still the same. St. Louis area, tornadoes down south. Thursday, New Year's Eve, still heavy rain, flash flooding possible, and freezing rain possible. But Hidden Valley in Eureka, Missouri opens up Friday for the first day of snowboarding and skiing. Let's go up near Kansas City. There are some winter storm warnings out for northwestern Missouri right now. Let's see what they're calling for in the northwest Missouri. Wintry mix expected today. Hazard travel conditions are expected. Snow and freezing rain this morning and afternoon with gradual transition to all rain from south to north. Largest snowfall totals across northwest Missouri. Minor to moderate ice accumulations. So if you live in the Kansas City, Maryville, Missouri, Kirksville, Missouri, Kansas City, they're calling for 1 to 2 inches of snow, 2 to 3 in St. Joseph, Missouri. Just north of St. Joseph, Missouri, they're calling for 4 to 6 inches of snow. Ice accumulation up to an inch of ice north of St. Joseph. But right now it is raining up there, so we'll see. We'll see, guys. I don't know. It's most likely Kansas City will be hit with another winter storm on Thursday and Friday. But right now they are in a quorum call, guys. You will hear muted until they speak. So here we go. We're going to go back to the Senate floor, and I'll be back with an updated weather forecast.
Madam President,
The senator from Texas is recognized
Madam President, I'd ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
without objection.
Madam President, we didn't expect to be in session this week, but we are. And of course, as we all know, the theme for this entire year has been COVID-19 writ large. More than 330,000 Americans have died from the novel coronavirus. Tens of millions have lost their jobs, and every community across the country has felt the devastating blow dealt by this pandemic. But as we know, the threats that existed long before this virus still are with us. Even though most of the world hit pause to battle COVID-19, our adversaries did not. And our brave service members didn't pack their bags and not show up for work when everybody else shut down. Over the last several months, as the Senate has worked to support our country through this pandemic, we've kept an eagle eye on the other threats on the horizon. And we passed the National Defense Authorization Act to ensure that we are prepared for whatever comes at us. For our forces to continue fighting and defeating our adversaries in every corner of the world, they need funding. They need stability. They need to be able to plan. And they need the unwavering support of the United States Congress and all 330 million Americans. The 2021 NDAA provides that support from Congress. It will prepare our military and service members to address the threats that exist today while preparing for those that we will inevitably face tomorrow. Earlier this month, this legislation passed the House by a vote of 335 to 78, and the Senate by a vote of 84 to 13. Those are rare vote margins in Congress these days, and that alone is a testament to the importance of this legislation and its bipartisan support. We know the President has the constitutional authority to veto any bill for virtually any reason, and he has exercised that power with this legislation. The reasons the President has given, I don't think are frivolous at all. That they just shouldn't be tagged to this particular piece of legislation. His concerns about Section 230 and under the Communications Decency Act and the power of these social media platforms to censor speech is troubling indeed. This is something we really haven't confronted before. We know that under the First Amendment, the government can't censor speech, but with small town newspapers and media outlets and other alternatives fading to away, more and more the American people rely on Facebook and Google and other internet platforms to get their information. And they have, I believe, become de facto public forum. So I agree that we do need to address Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, as the President has pointed out. The President also has a point about the commission to rename military bases that's part of the Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, the amendment that was adopted in the Armed Services Committee undermines the role of Congress once the commission makes its report to do as Congress believes should be done. But the truth is, as we've learned from our friends across the pond in the UK, no parliament can bind a future parliament, and indeed no Congress can bind a future Congress. That's true. So if these are things that the President believes we should address and that members of the Congress and the new administration believe we should address, we will address them. And we have an opportunity to do that. But we should not try to do that on this bill and risk the loss of this important piece of legislation now in its 60th year of adoption. The Defense Department is hands down the largest employer in the United States with nearly 2.9 million employees, including both service members and civilians. These men and women can be found in more than 160 countries around the world and on all 7 continents. Supporting them is a Herculean task, and the NDAA is a significant way in which we do that. The Defense Authorization Bill also includes a 3% pay raise for our troops and additional support for their families, such as career support for military spouses and quality child care on military bases. Given the fact we have an all-volunteer military, it's important we not only support our service members who wear the uniform, but the families that support them as well. I've heard it said you can recruit a member of the United States military, but if you want to retain them, you got to take care of their family. And I believe that's absolutely true. This bill also ensures previous reforms to improve the quality of military housing and healthcare are implemented appropriately. Those who serve in our military have made tremendous sacrifices in order to safeguard our freedoms and our way of life. I regard our support for them and for our national defense the #1 priority of the federal government. Everything else pales in significance. So we should do everything in our power to ensure that they and their families are appropriately taken care of. Beyond pay and benefits, that means giving them, the military members, the training, the facilities, the equipment they need, not only to succeed on the job, but to return home safely. The NDAA authorizes military construction projects across the country, including $183 million in Texas, which will bring serious updates and improvements to our military bases. At Joint Base San Antonio, this funding will provide for a range of new facilities, including a barracks, a flight simulation system, and an F-16 mission training center. At Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth, it will support an F-35 operations and maintenance facility, vehicle maintenance shop, and an aircraft maintenance hangar. It will also support fuel facilities at Fort Hood and provide additional funding for the Pantex plant in Amarillo, which maintains a large portion of our nuclear stockpile. Maintained and modernized facilities are a critical component to military readiness, and this legislation makes tremendous investments in our facilities around the world. It will authorize 93 new F-35 Joint Strike Fighters that will be built by Texans in Fort Worth. As we work to counter increasingly sophisticated adversaries around the world, this investment in our military readiness could not be more important. In addition to supporting our members in uniform and ensuring they're ready for action when called upon, the NDAA helps our military take stock of the evolving threat landscape and ensure that our country is taking active steps to counter threats on the horizon. In recent years, China and Russia have risen to the top of the threats to our world, to our country, and to world order, with China now assuming the #1 role. We remember the Cold War after World War II, where we've sought to contain and counter Soviet expansionism, and actually the mutual deterrence that we've established during that time has worked. But China is a unique challenge, and none of the old rules apply to China. They're increasingly belligerent and well-resourced and continue to demonstrate a lack of respect, not only for the U.S. and our closest allies, but for basic human rights. The Chinese government continues its disturbing and unacceptable genocide against the Uyghur people. The so-called political re-education camps are nothing more than concentration camps where Uyghurs are tortured. Recent reporting has found that the treatment in these camps often includes forced abortions, birth control, and sterilization. And China continues to chip away at the freedoms and autonomy of Hong Kong, notwithstanding its promises to the contrary, using a so-called national security law to extinguish opposition to the Chinese Communist Party and to deny the people of Hong Kong the freedoms that they were promised. As I mentioned, though China doesn't stand alone as a threat to the world, Russia is becoming increasingly aggressive around the world in its efforts to wreak chaos and sow discord. Since their attempts to interfere with the 2016 election, we've witnessed aggression after aggression from Russia, not just here in the cyberspace, but around the world. From Russian-backed mercenaries fighting in the Middle East, to its attempt to steal the virus vaccine research, and in the last few weeks, a massive cyber attack on U.S. government agencies. Russia continues to undermine the U.S. and our allies and shows no signs of stopping. It's become increasingly clear, if it wasn't already, that China and Russia adhere to no rules and no principles but their own. As the National Defense Strategy outlined, the threats posed by these two countries are increasingly dangerous, and countering these growing threats requires a clear and concentrated effort from Congress. That's exactly why passing the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is so important. This legislation prioritizes strategic competition with China and Russia and takes a strong approach to counter the threats posed by adversaries around the world. It will build on the progress we've made in recent years to strengthen our military after the draconian cuts during the Obama-Biden administration and achieve peace through strength. Over the last several decades, the NDAA has provided an annual opportunity for us to take stock of the evolving threat landscape and ensure that our national defense is prepared to meet the challenges, not only of today, but of tomorrow. And this year's Defense Authorization Act is no exception. It takes a strong approach to counter the threats posed by our adversaries around the world. It invests in modernized national defense that's critical to maintaining peace through strength, and it provides support for our service members and their families. And above all, it sends a message to the world that our country is and will remain the global military leader. I've supported this legislation on the Senate floor many times, and I'll do so once again when the opportunity to vote to override the veto presents itself. One of Congress's most critical responsibilities is to provide for the common defense. And the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, is how we will deliver. Madam President, I yield the floor, and I'd note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
The senator from Oklahoma
Madam
and
President, I
chairman
ask
of
unanimous
the
consent
Senate Armed
that the
Services
quorum-
Committee. Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I I was disappointed last week when President Trump vetoed the NDAA. This bill has been out there. This will be the 60th year that we've had the NDAA. The NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. And I've said so many times, countless times, on the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate, that this is the most important bill that we have. Some people don't agree with that, but I do. That's what we're supposed to be doing here. We're supposed to be defending America. And there's a lot, we're in the most threatened situation we've ever been in. I sometimes look back and think of the good old days of the Cold War, when you had two superpowers out there. And we knew what they had, they knew what we had. Mutual assured destruction meant something at that time. You know, you kill us, we kill you, and everyone's happy. But that's living in the past. But anymore now, with the weaponry that's out there, you can get one outside group that doesn't have any resources at all, and they have the ability to wipe out another country. It's a real threat that we're up against. I do chair the committee called the Senate Armed Services Committee, and of course, I've been very active in the National Defense Authorization Act every year since 1987. It's a long time. So I'm proud of the conference report that we had, the NDAA right here. Our vote in this Senate was 84-13. Wow, that's, you can't find that kind of togetherness in a cause anywhere else. But it puts members of the family, of the military first. And I share the President Trump's frustration about Section 230. And I know that it's a complicated thing. The majority of people in America don't know what that's all about. But Section 230 is something that has nothing to do with the military, nothing at all. The committee that I chair is the Armed Services Committee. That would be found in the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee is chaired by Senator Lindsey Graham. He does a great job chairing that. That's where any kind of reform in Section 230 should come from. And I agree that the president should have the authority to determine troop levels. That's what we have in this bill. We have we have the president making those decisions. That's why we made sure that the final NDAA gave the president very broad authority in determining troop levels all around. And we've looked at them in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe. We've looked at them in Ethiopia, in Afghanistan, and other places around the world. And so we look at what we've done. And I was going to mention, I've been down here several times talking about the president, what he has done, and what he has done, the great job that he's done for the United States. And I'm going to wind up some comments on a card that I put together. I put this card together back in 2 years ago, talking about the top 10 Trump accomplishments. And I think it's important that people remember that now. You're going to get a lot of people down here forgetting about all the really good things that have happened. But and so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I'm here today because we have to pass the NDAA. This would be the 60th year in a row that we have the NDAA, and it's necessary to have. It's the most important bill of the year. I've believed this for a long time. You've heard me say it before. I always stand with our troops. Here are a few of the military service members and their families will suffer if we don't enact it for the 60th year. If the NDAA is not passed, more than 200,000 military families will see smaller paychecks in January because the special pays and the bonuses for hazard pay are all a part of this bill. Additionally, it would hurt the areas where the military is having this most serious problem. In a way, it's kind of a mixed bag, because we have, prior to the pandemic coming along, and that was in about March of last year, before that happened, we had the best economy, I could argue, that we've had in my lifetime. And all these things were very, very good. And then, of course, when that happened, everything changed. Now, one of the problems you have when you have such a great economy is that you have a lot of competition. You know, we have to have a military force. That military force has to have resources. They have to have the ability to step in, because we don't know where the next threat's going to come from. And this would, with people with special abilities, now I'm talking about pilots and cyber experts and engineers and doctors, that's where we have a problem. You know, we don't have enough of them. Pilots, I've been an active pilot now for longer than most members here have been alive. And I know that back during the previous administration, the Obama administration, we had a real serious problem because we were not able to attract the pilots at that time. And because that was when we had a president who, and he wasn't ashamed of it. His top priority was not defending America. That wasn't what he had other priorities. And so consequently, we went through a period of the last 5 years of his administration were the year 2010 through 2015. And during that time frame, he reduced the funding for the military by 25%. At the same time he did that, China was increasing theirs in that same time frame by 83%. So we have China increasing their military expenditures by 83% at the same time we're reducing ours by 25%. And so we had serious problems there. And one of the areas where when people are cutting the military that they do it where it won't be as noticeable was in the flying hours. So we had pilots out there, but they weren't flying the hours that they needed to fly to keep their proficiency up. And consequently, a lot of them left and went to the airlines and went other places because they were wanting to be flying the hours. And that's one of the things, the problems that we had during that time. So we have the military's ability to recruit and retain service members that are in the shortest supply. And as I mentioned, that would be things like cyber experts and engineers and doctors. So they have the skill sets that need to be done out there. And of course, this president came along and we started rebuilding the military. I always remember being at the White House during a time that we were talking about what we're going to do with the military. And he actually looked over at me and he said, "What do you think we need to do with the military?" I said, "It's going to have to rebuild the military. It's going to cost something like $750 billion before it's over." He said, "That's what we should do. We need to start with that." And this president, with his leadership, took us with a new priority in defending America and building our military. And it happened. So we have the things that will happen that if we don't pass this thing, the education of children for military families. There's a thing called the impact aid. Impact aid comes about when we don't have you don't get the tax base increased with the added enrollment into the schools, the children of military families. So they have impact because they don't pay the taxes. So the impact aid is an amount of money that it supplements that to all of it's not just in my state of Oklahoma, but throughout the country. It ensures that children of military families receive a quality education by supplementing the school districts, the budgets where they're required. If the NDA is not passed, military construction projects. You know, I have one in my state of Oklahoma that is one that would, let's see, where is that? Yeah, we have a thing where we have an ammunition depot, a demolition shop for one. And this is something where we've gone through a lot of BRAC rounds, base realignment and closure commissions, and we have increased the size of our ammunition demolition activities substantially, and we're doing most of it now right there in Oklahoma. Well, this has a new demolition shop in there so we can get rid of a lot of these things we were not able to get rid of. So we have military construction projects in 38 states, and one happens to be in the state of Maine. It's very significant that they be able to do these projects. If the military constructions don't happen, both an authorization and appropriation. People don't understand this because it's kind of talk around. But in order for something to get done, you have to have it authorized. That's what the committee that I chair does, authorize military projects. Then it has to be appropriated. And the appropriators come along and they put the money in there. And that's how this system works. So the NDAA, if it's not passed, the military won't be able to increase the end strength or the total number of troops in the military services. That's where they're needed to address the growing threats. End strength increases. If it doesn't happen without authorization, you can't appropriate it. So the NDAA, if it should not be passed, the Pentagon loses the ability to quickly and efficiently process security clearance investigations. Right now, there's a backlog because it takes a long time to do this, but this has a streamlining provision in it that's going to make that a lot easier. So we'll be able to get security clearances. All these things are tied into this bill. The OD, if we didn't pass this thing, would lack the authority to pay the non-military personnel on hospital ships. They're the ones who are doing the great job right now with the COVID response. And that's just kind of a snapshot of what we're counting on to support our troops in the field, the bare minimum we need. Without the NDAA, we lose all of that and also lose all of the other policies. Right now is this bill makes China the primary strategic threat. I think we all understand that. We have strategic threats from Russia and China. Last year, we had the European part addressed. This year, the bill that is pending right now that we're going to try to get passed for this year, and I think we will successfully do that, but that's going to be concentrating on the Pacific area. That's China and the things that China is doing that many people don't realize the threat that's out there. Right now, we're up, as I understand it, to 7 different areas where the Chinese are actually creating islands in the South China Sea. This is something that's different than has ever been done before. I've always contended it's still illegal, but they're still doing it. They're doing it, and that's what they are. The effort that they're making there. And if you go into these islands where they're rebuilding, it's almost as if China is preparing for World War III. All of them are in this. This is what is happening right now. Right now we know about this SolarWinds hack, the hack that we're facing. That's something where we have language to deal with that in the Defense Authorization Bill. The new Hunt Forward Authority that allows our cyber operators to do more work to find malicious actors proactively. And this is something that we need to get done for the safety, for the defense of our country. It implements the Cyber Solarium Commission and the recommendations. There are 27 recommendations that they have in this commission. And it establishes a new national cyber director. These are things where it's a moving target. There's a lot of things that we're doing now that we should have been doing before. And it took China and Russia to kind of forge ahead of us, as they did in the previous administration, to remind us that we have these very serious problems. So our troops need the NDAA, and it's our responsibility to make sure that they have the equipment and the training and the resources to complete the mission and return home safely. I'll close with this one reminder. On December the 29th, 1777, 243 years ago today, General George Washington wrote to the Continental Congress imploring that they need to provide the resources his troops needed. He wrote, and this is a quote from that, he said, "I hope that the supplies they will be able to furnish in aid of those which Congress may immediately import themselves will be equal and competent to every demand. If they do not, I fear I am satisfied the troops will never be in a situation to answer the public expectation and perform the duties required of them. You know, that's just true today as it was in 1777. So we've got to do that. If we look at the national security wins of this president, I think people don't talk about that as much. We have identified China as the #1 adversary. That was in the NDS, that's the National Defense Survey. It was put together by 12 of the real experts, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats. It's been the blueprint for our military ever since that time. This is about 3 years ago. And this is what and they identified China as the major threat. $2.5 trillion to rebuild the military. And that's what we were able to get done. Increase the size of the military, replace the obsolete equipment, new investments in future tech. Hypersonics is a good example. Both hypersonics, both Russia and China are ahead of us in that area of hypersonics. It's a new state of the art. The pay raise for the kids. Took out the terrorist leaders. Yeah, how many people remember that? Baghdadi and Soleimani, they were the top terrorists in the world. They're gone now. This president, this administration took care of that. Established a Space Force. You know, when the Space Force, that was the first new force that was established in many, many years. I wasn't real sold on it at first because I thought we were doing a pretty good job, but it wasn't coordinated. You had the different military units doing it, and they weren't really even talking to each other. So that's what we put together. That was this president that provided the leadership in doing that. The widow's tax, everybody remembers that. That was something that had to be done, and we did it. Others talked about it. This president did it. The ISIS caliphate is destroyed. The Abraham Accords, they supported Israel through the security assistance, and we know that that's going on. It's going on today. All these things this president has done, and has done a great job. But I do want to mention, and I think it's worthwhile doing because it's we know what won't happen if we don't pass this bill. We won't get the bonuses necessary. I already mentioned that. Impact aid, I mentioned that. Military construction project authorizations, we would not have that. The full pay for DOD civilians, that has to be done, but that's been talked about by a lot of administrations, but not really done. And then I've finalized this by talking about the China. I mean, this bill supports or helps China. Nothing in the bill helps China in any way at all. There's a group called the American Enterprise Institute. That's a group, it's kind of the conservative conscience of that evaluates programs that come along. They said, and this is a quote, they said, this bill has the most substantial and consequential China-related provisions since the 2000 NDAA. Now, they're talking about this bill, what it does for China. It establishes the Pacific deterrence. Well, we talked about the European deterrence last year in the NDAA bill. This is the Pacific deterrence. That's China that we're talking about. It shifts the supply chains away from China in semiconductors, printed circuit boards, pharmaceuticals, and it stimulates the economies in those ways. It brings Chinese, the malign national security activities into light. So we know what they're doing, who the good guys are and the bad guys are. This supports Taiwan. You know, we've been doing that for a long period of time. This bill accelerates that program, prevents China's intellectual property threat. And I have a whole list here that I'd ask unanimous consent be inserted after my comments this morning.
Without objection.
And so what I'd like to wind up with, if I brought it, I did. 2 years ago, I put this card together. This was when I realized that because the media hates President Trump, people were not aware of what all of the good things that he did in those first couple of years, and people were not aware of it. First of all, on the card, and I'm just go ahead and run over these. The biggest tax cuts, and you know, we learned a lesson back there during a Democrat administration. John Kennedy was said the best way to get more revenue in for the Great Society programs that they're advocating at that time, the best way is to reduce marginal rates, and that will increase revenue. It did. Unfortunately, John Kennedy died before he could reap the benefits that came with that. But it worked, and of course others followed him, including Presidents Clinton, President Bush, and others, by reducing the rates. That also increased the revenue. But what this president did that was different than the rest of them, he not just increased or decreased the rates, the tax rates, but he also decreased all the overregulation. How many people know that back during the Obama administration, we had a rule that we're adhering to that said if you are a domestic oil and gas producer in the United States of America and you're in competition with China or somebody else, you had to give them our whole playbook on how we put together our system over here, and all the elements put us at a disadvantage with our competitors in China. And in energy, you know, just look at I was happy that I used to say that after Obama got out of office, the war on fossil fuels was over for a while. And look at the energy dominance now. We're the global leader in oil and gas production. A 277% growth in crude exports, 132% increase in coal exports, a 52% increase in natural gas exports. These are exports. That's what we're doing now in the United States as a result of the efforts of this president in bringing our economy around. The crackdown on the illegal migration, you know, nobody wanted the wall, they said. Now the people realize that's where a lot of the bad people were getting in. We moved the embassy. Every Democrat and Republican president in my memory tried to move the United States embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. They all talked about it. They didn't do it, so this president just went ahead and did it. He enacted the infrastructure bill, the WRDA bill, the Water Resource Development Act, the FAA reauthorization. And he had in the judges that we have, not just Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, but I think our number is up now to about 225 new judges. He repealed the over-regulation of the Dodd-Frank rules. Anyone in business will tell you that that was one of the major things, accomplishments of this president, President Trump. The record employment, that's on. But then I would say the one thing, the 10th and last one that I mentioned to everyone who will listen is what he did for the military. We went from the time of dropping down in the last 5 years of the Obama administration by 25%, while China was increasing 83% now, so that we have rebuilt that military. And that's why the NDAA is so significant right now, to make sure that that gets passed and that we are able to have that. And that's what this vote is all about. That's what the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, the most important bill of the year. That's why we are doing it, and that's why we that's why we're here today during this holiday season. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President,
Democratic whip
we're in quorum call. I ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
without objection.
Mr. President, it's an unusual sighting of a senator in the Capitol between Christmas and New Year's. This is one time we really try to reserve for our personal and family responsibilities. Our family, like others, looks forward to the Christmas season. It's one time a year we desperately try to find ways to come together. Of course, COVID-19 intervened and made that more challenging. But even so, the notion of coming back to Washington this week and staying perhaps more than a day to try to finish our work is unusual, and the circumstances surrounding it are extraordinary as well. Not the least of which is the fact we have two bills that have to be thought of in context of our responsibilities. First and foremost is the National Defense Authorization Act. This month, both the House and the Senate passed with overwhelming bipartisan majorities the fiscal year 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma, Republican, was on the floor before me. He and Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island put in more time than most members can appreciate to make sure that this bill really served our military and the goal of national security. They came up with a good bill, one I was proud to support. This annual legislation has been signed into law for 6 consecutive decades. When the Senate fails to do anything, they always do the National Defense Authorization Bill. It shows that Congress can come together, at least on this measure, when it comes to supporting our men and women in uniform and keeping our country safe. This year, the bill authorizes $740.5 billion in defense spending. It provides another 3% well-deserved pay raise for our troops. It also recognizes that many in the armed forces are on the front lines here at home as well, helping fight the ongoing COVID-19 epidemic, providing our troops with necessary benefits and protections, including a 10% increase in hazardous duty pay. The bill also includes a number of provisions that I authored and supported, including language expressing strong support for the Baltic states and Ukraine, especially in the face of continued, unforgivable Russian aggression. It requires the renaming of military bases in the United States, which were once named in honor of Confederate generals, those who served in the Confederacy in an attempt to secede from the Union and to defend the institution of slavery, have been enshrined in the names of these bases for many, many years. This effort to rename them is long, long overdue. It tries to correct and recognize the mistakes of our past and really address the sensitive racial inequities at the Pentagon when it comes to this decision-making. It places restrictions on the transfer of military equipment to law enforcement agencies. We have to address the issue of militarization of our police at a time when we are frankly making an assessment of the role of police to make certain that the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers who are good, principled, civic-minded individuals are honored, and those who fail to meet the test are removed from service. It expands benefits to our veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange during the Vietnam War. There are 191,000 Vietnam-era veterans in my state of Illinois. Many of them were exposed to toxins such as Agent Orange during their service and now are paying the price. It makes it easier for victims of military sexual trauma to report instances of such crime and expand support for survivors. The most recent horrible incident at Fort Hood was a reminder of what we need to do to bring the military into the 21st century when it comes to respecting the rights of all people, men and women. It strengthens safeguards against foreign cyber attacks. We know how important that is after the recent revelation confirmed by Secretary of State Pompeo that Russia is at work again, attempting to compromise our federal agencies, their data, their information, and the security secrets that they keep for our protection. It authorizes funding for PFAS-related research. If you've never heard the phrase PFAS before, I can tell you you're bound to hear it in the future. This was used as a flame retardant and in some other capacities on many Air Force bases and military bases around the United States. We're finding it's still there and it's still dangerous. We need to put money into remediation to help these military installations, including Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois, where PFAS was detected earlier this year. Still, despite all the good things in this bill, the bipartisanship that supported it, President Trump decided to veto the bill, one of his rare vetoes. He prefers we continue to honor the Confederate leaders who committed treasonous atrocities in order to preserve slavery. I don't think that is reflective of the United States of today or its values, but that's his position. And when he was called out for this racist inclination, he changed the reasoning for his veto. He claims the bill didn't do enough to fight China, or that we should include a measure to address liability issues for tech companies. Never mind that tech company liability matters have nothing to do with the National Defense Authorization Act. He just doesn't like that there's criticism coming down for some of the misstatements and lies and disinformation he's been spreading on social media. The president also fails to recognize that this defense authorization bill, in fact, does get tough on China, creates a new Pacific deterrence initiative that puts America back in the seat of leadership in that region where we need to be. The Trump administration could have started this initiative on its own. They did not. So Congress stepped up and created this security partnership because the White House was asleep at the wheel. At the end of the day, I suppose we can't expect anything more from a president who has denigrated our troops by calling them suckers and losers. I voted to support the fiscal year 21 NDAA. I'll support it again to override this president's unforgivable and reckless veto. I'm glad the House did so on Monday. I hope we in the Senate do the same. Coming back to Washington was not something I look forward to this week. I wanted to stay home. But I knew when it came to funding our troops, I had to be here. Many of my colleagues feel the same. I hope tomorrow we can take that up quickly. Then there was the drama around the COVID-19 relief bill. It was hard to describe what we went through in the last week to 10 days with messages from the White House. I wish that the president and those around him advising him would have called to mind the 335,000 Americans who've lost their lives due to this deadly pandemic, and many more who've lost a family member, a friend, or a loved one. In Illinois, we've lost 16,000 lives to COVID-19. Tragic, historic. I extend my deepest condolences to the friends and families of those who've died or are fighting this virus. Many are my friends. More than 121,000 Americans spent last night in a hospital, a grim new record of hospitalization, as our heroic nurses and doctors face unrelenting stress from this crisis. I just think as I reflect on the interviews with these men and women who are on the front line of healthcare, how stoic they usually are, how controlled they usually are, and how they're losing it now. The overwhelming numbers that they're facing, the terrible prospect of someone dying with a member of their family unable to even enter the room on the last minutes of their life. It's got to be heartbreaking on a scale that none of us can imagine. But think about doing that every single day. They've done it. And I tell you, we will never be able to repay them with our gratitude. They are true American heroes. Many of us returned to Washington this week. As I said, celebrating the holidays in a fashion like never before. Social distancing, Zooms, FaceTime, calls with family and loved ones. It's no substitute for the kids being there to open the gifts on Christmas morning, but it's the reality of what we face today. There is some hope on the horizon, and though I've been critical many times of the Trump administration, I do want to give the president credit for the Warp Speed program. It is amazing as I read the stories of what they were able to achieve in discovering not more than one, I hope, and more than two vaccines that can treat Americans and people around the world, keep them safe as they face this coronavirus. We broke all the records in the discovery of these vaccines. And as I read about it, I am continued to be grateful and want to make sure America recognizes the doctors, the scientists, the researchers, Barney Graham. I didn't know his name until yesterday, and it came out in a story published in the New Yorker. He works at the National Institute of Health. He's given a great deal of credit for the breakthrough in the first 2 vaccines that have been approved, and others just like him. I want to salute Dr. Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Anthony Fauci, both of whom have become my friends over the years, and what a job they've done for America. So many more deserve recognition, and I hope there'll be an opportunity to give it to them. But the fact is, these doses of vaccines are starting to move across the country. In last week, Illinois, I'm proud to say, led the nation. I congratulated our governor, J.B. Pritzker, yesterday. More than 100,000 healthcare workers received their first shots last week. I asked him why we led, and he said, I don't know. We just put together our own program of distribution, and it worked. Thank goodness it did. Lives will be saved because of it. But there's so much more to do. Progress in administering the vaccine has been slow as we still struggle to reach the hardest hit areas, and the rosy projections from the administration have not come to fruition yet. But the fact is, we have 2 viable vaccines. That is miraculous. I look forward to the new administration, the Biden administration's new management of this effort. And I'm glad Congress came together to pass a relief bill, which included $30 billion for vaccine development and distribution. When the president said he wasn't going to sign this bill, I thought, how can he say that? He should be taking credit, rightfully, for the Warp Speed program and his role in seeing that program move forward, instead of complicating the distribution of the vaccine by threatening to veto the bill. Fortunately for us, in the end, he signed the bill. On Sunday evening, the president signed the bipartisan annual spending bill and the COVID-19 relief bill. There were complaints about the size of the bill. Well, the entire federal budget was included in that bill, as well as the COVID-19 relief undertaking, as well as many other bills, such as the Water Resources Development Act. All of these are major pieces of legislation. They were combined in one bill that went way beyond 5,000 pages. Unfortunately, the president delayed in signing the bill and created needless uncertainty in America, particularly among the unemployed and others who are suffering from this public health and economic crisis. This agreement provides much needed support for many of them, and they'll have some delay in receiving their checks because of the president's period of indecision. Enhanced unemployment benefits at $300 a week and an extension of the unemployment program created under the CARES Act through March 14th will bring real relief to many millions of families. $325 billion, possibly the largest single item in the COVID relief bill, went to provide our nation's ailing small businesses another chance at survival. The Paycheck Protection Program worked in the initial CARES Act. It was renewed in this undertaking. An extension of the federal eviction moratorium through January 2021, coupled with $25 billion in emergency rental assistance, will literally mean that people are not evicted right after Christmas. Approximately $850 million is going to Illinois to help keep families in their homes during this pandemic. The 15% increase in nutrition assistance is certainly needed. It goes through the SNAP program, which was historically known as food stamps, to make sure that families do have something on the table. I can tell you, I woke up this morning in Springfield, Illinois, to look at the front page newspaper to learn that an anonymous donor had given our local food bank $500,000. And the people of the food bank were, of course, appreciative and said they desperately needed it in my hometown and in towns all across America. So this increase in food stamp assistance is long overdue, and I'm glad it was included. The bill included a number of important measures, but we have to go to work to make sure that we deal with the short-term emergency response to this bill, but do more. We address the needs to meet the needs of the pandemic immediately, but more will follow. It was a tough negotiation and honest compromise. I was happy to be part of a bipartisan group of senators who may have got the ball rolling, at least we think we did, and handed it over to the leaders to finish the job. I think what we achieved on a bipartisan basis was largely included in the final bill, and it addressed the major elements that were necessary. One of the most important items that Congress failed to reach an agreement on was funding for state and local governments. States and localities are struggling with increased costs and decreased revenues due to the pandemic. By this summer, my home state of Illinois will have lost more than $5 billion in revenues. I can tell you that that's going to cause pain and cutbacks. This is not money that was lost in our pension system, which has its own share of troubles, but money that is directly attributable to the downturn in revenues because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It isn't just happening in Illinois, it's happening all around the country, in red and blue states, our neighboring state of Kentucky to the south of us, facing the same hardships we are. Federal funding for states and localities needs to be done for our great cities and great states that are struggling. And I certainly hope that the next president, when he's sworn in January 20th, will take this up as one of his highest priorities. Our nation's economic recovery is slowed down by budget cuts that will be necessary in states and localities because of this cutback in revenues. Now, the most widely discussed measure of the COVID-19 relief bill was the second round of economic impact payments. Just yesterday, the House of Representatives passed the CASH Act, a measure that would increase the direct payments to individuals, adults and children, from $600 to $2,000 for those who are earning less than $75,000 a year. The measure passed in the House by a vote of 275 to 174. Over the past several months, we've heard time and again from economists that we run the risk of doing too little and that far outweighs the risk of doing too much when it comes to this economic recovery. The head of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, has really instructed us to keep the foot on the accelerator so that our economy doesn't slump into a recession. At a time when so many American families are laid off, unemployed, and simply struggling to get by, there is nothing more invigorating to the economy than to have a cash infusion. Those with limited resources, battling to pay bills, turn around and spend that money quickly. They don't salt it away for some future rainy day. They need it now. And that's why we should seriously consider this. By passing this enhanced measure, we could restore the American public confidence in Washington in the fact that we are listening and working together on a bipartisan basis to respond. This measure that passed the House of Representatives has the support of the President, Speaker Pelosi, House Democrats, as well as many House Republicans. Leader Schumer and my Senate Democratic colleagues support it. So I hope Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, and his colleagues in the Republican caucus will join us and allow us to pass this bill quickly this week. Let's step up to the plate and get this done. The American people have waited too long for this relief. I, for one, am proud of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for coming together and passing a meaningful relief bill. But the time for patting one another on the back is over. Let's finish the job. Let's make sure that we have this authorization bill for the Department of Defense and that we come to the rescue of our families across America who need defense against the vagaries of this pandemic and this economy. We can finally see a slight glimmer of a light at the end of this tunnel. If we want to address the needs of Americans in crisis, it starts with passing this legislation. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of quorum. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, it's in a quorum call right now, folks. Thank you for tuning in to News to Share Missouri on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Stimulus check update, guys. McConnell blocks effort to quickly increase direct stimulus payments. We need to get McConnell out of office. He don't care about the American people. Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocked an effort to quickly pass a measure to increase the direct stimulus payments from $600 to $2,000, stating that the American people do not need this, that the economy is rebounding well. That is bad when all the other Republicans want to do it but him. And he's the majority leader. So we don't know what's going to happen with this stimulus check. Hopefully something good comes out of it. Hopefully. But we won't know. So, well, thank you all for watching today. We're still going to be here. They're getting ready to vote on the veto to overturn the veto of President Donald J. Trumper. Donald's been quiet on Twitter this morning, I think. He was on a Twitter rampage last week and yesterday, so I haven't seen much coming out of it. Let's see what we got here. Let's see here. That ain't giving me nothing. I was trying to see if I could find some comments from people. All right. Yeah, Donald Trump has, well, he texted 27 minutes ago. Unless Republicans, Donald Trump tweeted just 27 minutes ago, quote, unless Republicans have a death wish, and it's also the right thing to do, they must approve the $2,000 stimulus payments ASAP. $600 is not enough. Also, get rid of Section 230. Don't let big tech steal our country, and don't let Democrats steal the presidential election. Get tough. That was when Trump retweeted a Washington Post comment there. He tweeted, Post tweeted, McConnell blocks Democrats' initial attempt to approve 2,000 stimulus checks and amid growing pressure on GOP leader to act. Trump is still, crying about the election. Can you imagine if Republicans stole a presidential election from the Democrats? All hell would break out. Republican leadership is only wants the path of least resistance. Our leaders, not me, of course, are pathetic. They only know how to lose. P.S. I got many senators and congressmen and women elected. I do believe they forgot, is what Trump said there. So I don't know. He has a POTUS account. I wonder if he's posted anything. No, he just retweets whatever he puts on here. So the stimulus checks are coming. How much will you get and when? Well, they're saying that checks could be in the mail this week or in bank accounts of many Americans this week. So hopefully they come to a deal. Portraits of struggling Americans show an unequal economic recovery. The pandemic has upended lives and ravaged the U.S. economy. The pain hasn't been equally distributed. An economy is made up of people, and this year, millions of people have had their lives knocked off course by the pandemic. Yeah, we all had our lives messed up by the pandemic, so the Cheez-It Bowl, it kicks off at 5:30 Eastern time. I wonder if that's today, the Cheez-It Bowl. The cheesiest day in college football. So the OSU Cowboys, I wonder if that's today. $16 ago. I think the Cheez-It Bowl is tomorrow. Pokes versus Canes at 4:30 Eastern time on ESPN. So I think it's today. But let's explore Twitter a little bit. Let's explore Twitter a little bit, guys. Hashtag vote them out is trending on Twitter right now. Let's see the latest comments by some people. Here's a post by Thrillo. It states, "Hi, Georgians. Are you upset that Mitch McConnell just took $1,400 out of your pockets? You have the chance to make sure that guy doesn't have a say over who gets to eat or pay rent by kicking Perdue and Loeffner to the curb and telling Mitch to sit the F down. Vote them out." So the vote them out hashtag is going for the Senate runoffs. I think McConnell is putting the Republicans to death row. So, I don't know, guys. We're going back to the quorum call. It will be muted until quorum is up.